purpose of the Buddha's teaching in the end is to kind of to have insight and see reality as it actually is. And a very important part of that is to see through the illusion of self, yeah, the sense of I, which is always there. And to be able to help us see through that illusion, what the Buddha does, he shows us the main areas where that illusion tends to take root. And that is what the five khandhas are about. This is where the sense of self tends to kind of take root, somewhere in these five khandhas. And that is why they are called the five aggregates. I like to call it maybe the five factors of personality, or the five aspects of personality is what I like to call it. Five aspects of personality that are subject to attachment, to upadana. Upadana means to take up, yeah? You take these things up. And the reason they are subject to attachment is because this is where we see the sense of self, and this is what the sense of self holds on to. Yeah, that's why they're called upadana khandha. So it kind of lies in the, in part of the, in a sense, the almost the wording of the thing, panchupadana khandha. Upadana is the idea of attachment. It implies that the sense of self is kind of holding on to these things. So that is why these things are taught by the Buddha, so as to help us uncover the illusion of a self. So they're very, for that reason, very profound things. Yeah, very, very deep, and they can take us a long way on the path if we approach them in the right way. So these five aspects of personality subject to attachment or subject to taking up, they are, let's just go through them very briefly. They are form, yeah, rupa is the first one. And what does form mean? And sometimes it means similar to the physical body. Yeah, physical body is form, but actually it means form in a much broader sense than that. It means form in the sense of, if you imagine your vision, your visual perception, you see forms, yeah, air conditioned units, sound reducing, sound absorption panels, yeah, chairs up there, curtains. We see all these things, and all of these things are forms. They're like shapes. Yeah, that is what is the meaning of form, and our body also, in a sense, is a shape. Yeah, is part of that. So this is what is meant by form. Any kind of impression of the physical world, if you like, is what form is about. And this is interesting because it means that form is not limited to kind of ordinary forms that we see as human beings. Let's say that you get reborn in the Devaloka, yeah, it might be very different. And there might still be forms there. Or even when you go into a deep state of samadhi, there may be forms there. You may see things. And those things that you see there, those forms are part of the idea of the rupa khandha. So it's much more than just the ordinary thing. So when we die, for example, we don't leave all the form behind, because some of the forms are in the mind. They are mental images. So some of the form actually exists also after we die. The form isn't left completely behind. So the Buddhist idea of mind and body is much more interwoven than kind of the usual idea of mind and body, that they're two completely separate things. But in Buddhism, they're not completely separate things. They are very interwoven with each other. Even when you die, what you do is that you come out of this physical body, but you have another physical body here, which is a more fine material body, and that also is a form. Yeah, so form actually goes with you. It is quite complex, and only when you go very high to the immaterial attainments or whatever, is it possible to leave form entirely behind. But before that, it is always there. So it's quite a broad category of phenomena, rupa. It certainly does not just mean the body. Then and of course we take that as a sense of self. Yeah, you look at yourself in the mirror, you think that's me. Yeah, you don't think it's someone else, that's for sure. You think it's you. So that's me in the mirror. Okay, whoa. So when you see yourself, so this is how we attach to that form to some extent. Then second one is Vedana, and Vedana you're probably very familiar with already. It's quite an easy one to understand. Feeling in English means the extent to which any experience has a positive or negative or neutral impact on your mind. Is it positive? Is it good for you? Do you feel? Are you happy about this one? Is it a good feeling, or is it a bad feeling, or a neutral feeling? Three types of feelings. That's the feelings, and feelings are of course very significant, very important in life. Feelings are what gives our life value. Without feelings, there is no value. Feeling is what helps us to decide on anything in the world, whether we should pursue it or not. If it feels good, we tend to pursue it. If it feels bad, we tend to avoid it. Yeah, so feeling is what gives value to the world. And this is one of the reasons why a computer or an artificial intelligence can never really have values, because they can't feel the world. It doesn't matter how smart that artificial intelligence is, it can never actually feel anything. And because it lacks feeling, it lacks values. You hear the kind of horror stories, you go to the movies and they talk about, how machines kind of take over the world and they start killing human beings, that kind of stuff, as if they have a mind of their own. Yeah, machines are going to take over the world, we're going to run everything. These human beings are a nuisance, let's get rid of those human beings, we will take over the world. But machines can't do that sort of thing because they don't have any values in their own right. They don't feel that taking over the world is good or bad. For them it's nothing. Yeah, they don't have feelings. So machines are just the extension of the feelings of other human beings, those who program them. That's what machines really are. But they are value, don't have any values. So because of that, they can't really do that kind of stuff. So I think a lot of the fear that people have of artificial intelligence, I think it's misguided, personally. I think it's a lack of understanding the difference between machines and humans. The difference is quite significant. Anyway, that's a bit of a sidetrack here. Then there is perception. What is perception? And perception is our ability to recognize the world. That's what perception is. So when you're able to understand what I say, hopefully some of it anyway, and hopefully I am reasonably clear, but I'm not so sure about that either. But the perception is your ability. If you can understand me, that means that your perception is that you're perceiving what is going on. You're recognizing what I'm saying, or your ability just to this room. Your ability to see this room properly. That's perception. Yeah, there's a room, people, floor, tables. Yeah, all of these things. Coffee, one of the most important perceptions. Perception of coffee. And so we have all these perceptions which helps us to make sense of the world. We cannot make sense of the world without that. And it goes a long way. It's not just the immediate perception, but also deeper perceptions. Yeah, perceptions of value, of who are these people? Are they a friend or are they an enemy? Yeah, this is kind of a part of that perception. Perception about politics, about religion, about philosophy. All of us have these kind of perceptions in many different layers. And all of this is what helps us to make sense of things, enable us to understand what it's about. And so perception is very vast. It's a very, very important category of the five khandhas. And that too we hold on to, we attach to some extent. Yeah, we perceive certain things in a certain way. You perceive someone as a friend, and one day they don't want to talk to you anymore. It feels terrible, yeah, because you had one perception, your perception was challenged. When they don't want to talk to you anymore, you feel bad about that. Or you have an enemy, you are a sworn enemy, and one day they're friendly to you. You think, whoa, what happened? And your perception changes, and actually you think, well, that's a wonderful thing, and then you become friends with them. Yeah, so our perceptions too get challenged because of our attachment to them. And for that reason, you are happy, and then one day you get depressed, and you feel terrible. You feel depressed about being depressed because you had this idea, perception of yourself as a happy person. That too is a part of, can be a problematic. You perceive yourself as young, and then one day you look at yourself in the mirror, you realize, actually, I'm not young anymore. I'm middle-aged. Now I'm old. Okay, and that too is problematic. So perception, we attach to these things. Then there is volition. As the fourth one, sankhara. Sankhara literally means the will. And the will is just this feeling that we are agents in the world. Yeah, we have power to affect the world. We can do things. And that agency, the sense of being in charge, of being able to do things, that is what sankhara is all about in the five khandhas. So, and this is a very strong identification with the will. Yeah, it's a very important part of what we feel like as human beings. We are the doers. A lot of people identify with the doer. If you are a businessman or businesswoman, you do things. Yeah, you make things happen, and you identify with that because this is such an important part of your life. So you identify with the doer, and that is why, that is part of the khandhas. And you may wonder, how can you reduce some of that identity with the doer? Why is that a problem? One of the ways to do that is to recognize in your meditation practice, when you become peaceful, there's less doing going on, there's less thinking, less activity going on. So when the doer subsides, when the doer is reduced, you feel better. You feel more at peace, you feel more at ease, you feel more relaxed. And then you realize that the willpower, the doing, is actually a problem. It is actually causing you difficulties rather than being your friend. Actually, it is the exact opposite. This is very often how you relate to these things. You relate to them through your experience, and you start to understand why they are problematic. So that is the will. That is the fourth khandha. Very important part of the sense of self is in the will. And the last one is consciousness. It's awareness. The ability to be aware of anything at all. The fact that you are able to know anything, or be aware of anything, that's consciousness, vijnana. And this is perhaps the most basic thing of all that we take to be ourself, that we are aware. Even in the deepest states of meditation, awareness is still present, and that still serves as the basis for your identity, even in the deepest states of meditation. The knowing, you know what's going on, you are aware, you have the ability to be here. So that is in brief what the five khandhas are about. And all of these places is where we tend to place our sense of self. It is among these five khandhas somewhere. And this is why they are such an important thing in the Buddhist teachings, because this is where we look if we want to overcome the sense of self. So how do we actually overcome this? How do we actually deal with these five khandhas in practice? How do we actually, how do we see them as impermanent, for example? How do we understand them as suffering? This is kind of the point here, The five khandhas, in brief, the five khandhas are suffering. How do we do that? And one of the best ways of doing that is to do this through your meditation practice, but not by following what I would call traditional vipassana meditation practices, but by following the instructions of the Buddha. And the instructions of the Buddha for how to do this, you find this in places like the Anapanasati Sutta, the mindfulness of breathing here. And what you see in the mindfulness of breathing sutta is, actually we're going to talk about this later on when we do the meditation afterwards, I think. It was not actually here. What you see in that sutta is that the Buddha looks at the mindfulness of breathing through a number of stages, 16 stages of mindfulness of breathing, And it starts off with the long breath, the short breath, calming the breath, feeling the full body of the breath, and all of these kind of things. And then it goes through feeling the breath, various ways of feeling the breath, piti, with sukha, with what is it? Not chitta sankhara. Anyway, it has all the feelings. Then it has all the various formations of the mental things. So various stages that you go through, deeper and deeper experiences of the breath meditation. Deeper and deeper, the breath becomes fainter and fainter. You feel more and more happiness. Things are gradually becoming simpler and simpler as you go through this process. And then, when you come to the very end of the first 12 steps, that is where you enter a jhana state, vimochayang chittang, liberating the mind. And then after that, you have the last 4 of the 16 steps, and they are aniccanupassi, viraganupassi, nirodhanupassi, and patinisaganupassi. And these are all contemplations that you do after you have gone through the first 12, or at least some of the first 12 steps. And aniccanupassi is contemplation of impermanence, which is very similar to what we're talking about now, the 5 aggregates being dukkha. Contemplating the impermanence of these things. Viraganupassi is the fading away. You're contemplating the fading away. Fading away of what? Of that whole process I've just been mentioning very briefly, of the breath becoming more and more refined. Nirodhanupassi, nirodha is cessation. You're contemplating the ending of things as they end through this process. Patinisaganupassi, the giving up, the relinquishment of these things, this whole process. So that process you have been looking at, the breath, becoming more and more refined. And as you do that, what you see is that things start to come to an end. Yeah, things start to disappear during that process. What is it that disappears? The body disappears. The five senses start to become less and less. All you have is the breath after a while. Everything else is gone. Certain feelings start to disappear because you can't feel the body anymore. And you have mental feelings of pity and joy instead. Then the joy starts to die down and you get other kinds of happiness coming up. Perceptions start to change. Yeah, these are the five khandhas, right? Perceptions start to change because initially you have a very coarse perception of the breath. It becomes more and more refined until the breath disappears completely here. So perception is changing. Certain perceptions are fading away. Certain perceptions are ceasing altogether here. The will, something is happening to the will as well. What is happening with the will is that as you go deeper and deeper in meditation, the will becomes less and less prominent until the mind is completely stable and the will is completely gone. Yeah. Consciousness itself also is actually becoming less and less here, because as you go through this process, as the senses shut down, the consciousness related to certain senses disappear. So consciousness itself is disappearing here. So what you are seeing here, you're actually quite literally seeing the five khandhas. You're seeing them gradually being impermanent, fading away, and ultimately ceasing completely. That is what you're seeing. The process of simply watching the breath. All you have to do is watch the breath, yeah? And as you go deeper and deeper, you observe, you can see directly how the five khandhas are changing here, and how they are disappearing completely here. That is all there is to it. It's very simple. Yeah, it's not kind of very mysterious at all. It's a very natural thing. You just go through this beautiful process, and you have afterwards, when you come out of that process, you come out of your meditation, whether it's a jhana or maybe not a full jhana, whatever it is, you look back and you see the impermanence of the five khandhas directly. And of course, when you see that impermanence, what you also see at the same time, you see, well, when those khandhas disappear, how do you feel? You feel better. Yeah, certain perceptions are disappearing, certain feelings are gone, the body is completely gone, the will is completely gone. A large part of the khandhas have disappeared, and you feel so much better for it. That is how you know. This is one way of knowing. Part of the knowledge that the khandhas are dukkha. You can see it directly, it's just in your face. It is so obvious when these things happen. That is why when you enter a jhana state, you actually have very profound insight, because a very large portion of the khandhas has disappeared, and you feel absolute bliss as a consequence. So you see impermanence, you see suffering. What about non-self? Well, non-self is also very similar, because non-self means that if something is yourself, it means it's something that you control, something which is always there, something which is present. But when things disappear completely and they're gone, and you are happier without it, it's very obvious that couldn't be yourself. Because actually, I'm glad that disappeared, yeah? I don't want to have anything to do with that. So it is no longer part of your self-perception. So you see also non-self. Yeah, so all you have to do is such a beautiful thing. All you have to do is watch the breath. Take the breath meditation really seriously. Keep on practicing that, taking it to deeper and deeper levels. And as you do that, and you look back upon the process, you see the impermanence of all this. You see the dukkha, you see the non-self. It is staring you in the face. You can't avoid the insights anymore. The insight just come to you. That's why the deeper your meditation is, the more insight you will have. Samatha vipassana, always going together. Deeper the calm, the samatha, I should translate this, samatha means calm, the deeper the calm, the better is your clarity of seeing, the more things you can see, because you see precisely this process of stopping, the process of things fading away. So this is what the five khandhas are all about, and this is why they are important. This is how you contemplate them, and this is really what it's all about.